As we round things up for the day, we've got our final plenary. So what we've done is we've looked at where we are today in the region, what are the global trends that we have to look to, and now, as we embark on the next phase, we've seen how ICT is transforming all kinds of different sectors through all the breakout sessions that you've been to, and exchanged ideas with the panelists, with the moderators. And now we sort of want to round it up because tomorrow we're going to take it to the next level, a look at the key enablers for advancing the ICT industry in the region. And to do that, we want to understand how we're going to realize this potential. So kind of rounding up today's discussions, we have our final plenary session, which is moderated by Mr. Emil Qubaisi of Silicon Badia. Is that correct? That is correct. What are you waiting for, man? We want you up here. Sure. Yep. Go for it. Wherever you're comfortable.
Thank you. So first of all, I'd just like to call the panelists up to join me on the table. I see Laith moving in our direction. I see Dr. Magdi Amin and Mr. Jim Poison. And we'd love to have Anne Habibi. I can't see her. There she is, running in our direction. And Khalid Jabassini. And there, yeah, so we've got everybody here. So, so ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much. When I was imagining our panel for today, the thought in my mind, I said, let me just think that I've invited such distinguished panelists to my kitchen. And we're sitting around the kitchen table and having a conversation. And ignore the fear of having 50 people in the room. So I'm very thankful that you guys are actually, will all fit in my house. So it's great to have you guys here, and I really thank you for joining this session and joining this panel. And welcome to all of our distinguished panel. And just to briefly introduce the panel and briefly introduce the context of the conversation. And really maybe just to highlight one point. I mean, today, in many ways, when we talk about realizing the potential, at least Majdi and myself we spent the morning with about 50 to 80 entrepreneurs in the Invest in ICT session. And I'll tell you, I mean, in terms of realizing ICT potential, we saw a lot of it in the eyes that we saw this morning. So it's extremely exciting. But just to introduce everybody very quickly, and then I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves more formally. First of all, we have Ms. Anne Habibi, the co-CEO of All World Network. It's a privilege to have you here.
Thank you.
We have Dr. Magdi Amin from the MENA Investment and Climate Advisory Manager at the International Finance Corporation. We have Mr. Laith Al-Qasim, a gentleman I respect extremely, the chairman of the Arabian Business Consultants for Development. For color, we have Mr. Khalid Jabassini, and I emphasize the word color, an exceptional entrepreneur, to the extent where the title on his email and the name of his new venture are fundamentally different. So I'll introduce his new venture, which is Sync on Air, which we'll be presenting tomorrow at 12:30. And Mr. Jim Poison, the president of the World Information Technology and Services Alliances. And doing my research on Jim, I was blown away in terms of his organization representing about 90% of the ICT industry globally. Maybe just digging into it immediately, the role of a moderator, as I understood it, is to start by really framing the challenge. And I really want to share with you, kind of like my thinking that I had shared with the moderators, and then we're going to have a nice conversation together. and then really encourage the audience participation. We'd love questions. I don't know who's taking the lead in terms of with the mics, but we'd welcome questions any time. But just to give you a little bit more context, you know, and from its birth almost a century ago, the US technology ecosystem has evolved to become a key economic engine for the country. In 2008, technology companies accounted for 11% of US private sector workforce and generated $3 trillion in revenue. More importantly, this ecosystem has helped bring about one of humanity's most transformative revolutions, deeply impacting the lives of billions of people. It is also unquestionably shaping our future. Today, we would like to discuss how we can unlock the Arab world's potential to generate similar impact on its ICT sector, locally, regionally, and globally. The challenges are tremendous and require long-term efforts from every stakeholder in our society. But ignoring them is not an option. The world of technology is marching on with unprecedented speed. And in discussing this point around our kitchen table, I would like to maybe start with Laith, since he's closest to me, and to ask each and every one of our distinguished panelists just to introduce themselves and to really ask the question, what are you or your organization doing to help realize the Arab ICT potential?
You want a
intro
and then address that? Okay.
Just 1 to 2 minutes.
I've been involved with entrepreneurs since 1988. I managed, I think, the Arab world's first venture capital company and first technology incubator in Jordan. I've been involved in, I would say, over 25, 30 startups, most of them in the technology field. Since 2003, I established a company and became an entrepreneur myself called Arabian Business Consultants for Development, ABCD. And what we're doing to realize the potential is that we're working with Jordanian and Arab entrepreneurs at the startup phase, helping them conceptualize their ideas, help guide them, help them with marketing, help them with business planning, and helping them to find finance. We're also working with existing entrepreneurs, people who have companies, and helping them grow their businesses and develop their strategies.
Thank you very much, Laith.
Magdi Amin, I manage the Investment Climate Advisory Services Group here in MENA, out of Cairo. So you'd like our intervention?
Yeah.
Okay, well, fantastic. So, I mean, I thought about the question you asked and the title of this about the Arab Spring for ICT. And I reflected that actually this region has always been an innovator. I mean, the question is framed as if we are somehow fallen behind. And so I explored that a little bit. And, you know, 1,000 years ago, just to take a step back a little bit, I'm not going to speak for an hour, don't worry. But 1,000 years ago, the ecosystem for knowledge was basically around the Abbasid period in Baghdad, the most vibrant place for knowledge. In competition a little bit later with the Umayyads in Cordoba, in Granada. The two most vibrant places there, the biggest libraries there were about 500,000 books, compared at the time with about 36 books for the largest library in Europe at the time. And so what happened, and how did we lose our groove, so to speak? A few hundred years later, 1445, I think, Gutenberg invented the printing press. But then about 40 years later, it was outlawed by the Ottoman Empire. It was outlawed because books at the time were handwritten. A lot of them were religious books, and it wasn't seen to be fitting that they should be copied off. Later on, it was slightly opened up, but it had to be overseen by religious scholars. Not until 1798 were printing presses allowed in Egypt. Why? Because at the same time, Napoleon had invaded Egypt. But by 1800, the literacy rate in the Ottoman Empire was about 3%. At the same time, in England, is about 50%. And so that question of government control preventing progress has been with us for a while. Since then, we had successive waves of centralized governments that only recently have started to open up. And what we see today in terms of an Arab Spring is a process of empowerment that, for all of what we see that is good and bad about it, is moving ahead. And every time there's a sort of a step back toward possibly looking at less openness, there is a protest. And I see that every day. There's protests even today. The long-term trajectory is very good. We're going to see a world where people are empowered. But that trajectory will be a lot longer and more difficult if the ICT sector doesn't play a much bigger role in enabling that transformation. Enabling the transformation in how firms connect with markets, how governments connect with people, and how the education sector connects with the users of the education services in the private sector and in business and in civil society. One thing we're doing as a result of this is trying to work with industries to understand their education needs, the skill needs, qualitatively and quantitatively, quantitative and qualitatively, and then work with the education sectors to change what they do and to provide the right set of skills. And the first project of this sort, an initiative called Education for Employment, is here in Jordan with Intaj. And there's the Scottish Qualification Agency is here working with us. I would like to introduce you to them to better understand what you need in terms of skills from the sector. So I see this as a process of continuing openness to adjust for what happened a few hundred years ago, but that is accelerated. And in the long run, this will remain and it will always be an innovative region with the right enabling environment.
Thank you very much, Majdi. Khalid, if you can just introduce yourself and basically talk about your relevance to...
بس ايش رايك نعملها سؤال وجواب وهيك مش حقدر احكي كثير في شوي. Okay, Khalid Jabasini. I'm a Jordanian serial entrepreneur. I started long time back, but it's not on the 80s, like in the 90s. And I made some few millions online. And I started with maktub.com with Samih Touqan in 2000, even before that, but that was one of the success case study. Then I moved to try to establish my own companies without support, without investment. Started with Jabasini, their relatives, but I was the poor guy of the Jabasini people. So I started with my own money, $10,000, and I ended up selling my company to Jabbar Group. I cannot say the number because they don't want to mention it, but it was some good millions. And I thought I'm going to relax, and khalas, I was 37. And I found that, no, I can support the ICT ecosystem. And I started developing now applications and technologies. And since I started from Jordan in Maktub days, and then I expanded into the Gulf, so I was almost aware of where the money is, and even the ideas and the concepts. But we were not having so much technology, so I brought some big players in the region to the region, like DoubleClick, Silverpop, as actual partners. Some of the big players, they advertise with us in several companies like Google, Microsoft, to name a few, but this to show how we were very credible. And I always try to create new heroes. We have maybe now 18 new CEOs, all below 30, which is, one of them is 23. He was heading one of the companies I sold to Jabbar. And I took it from there. Now we have tomorrow a session at 12:30, something new to the Middle East. We are the second company in the whole world that will implement second screen applications and synchronize all TVs, radios, and even print to the iPad and the iPhone. And it's our own technology. We got some French and European affiliations, but because it's so costly and we're like now searching for investments, I spent all my millions in the 3 years back, but at least now an ecosystem and like benefit from the ICT sector. So I'm trying to represent the entrepreneurial, and help the new entrepreneurs in the market by opening companies and trying to get investment for that.
Well, it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Anne, if I can maybe lean on you to just share with us as well.
Great, thank you very much. Is this on? Is it on?
Is it on?
Is it on now? Yeah, it's on. Now it's on?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Hello.
Well, thank you very much. I want to be fast because there are a few things I want to say, so I'm going to speak unbelievably fast. First of all, my organization is called All World Network. If you've seen big globes, that's the All World logo. So wherever you find massive globes, that's All World. We have a booth downstairs and you can learn more. But the thing that you're going to be interested in, I think the most, is what's called the Arabia Fast Growth 500. So All World has done a number of things, but most relevant in this case is a ranking of 500 of the fastest growing, hot, private companies of the region. And when we started this, people said to us we should call it the Arabia 50, because with a few very famous examples sitting next to me and a few that are in the audience and downstairs and out on the patio, there were not going to be 500. People could count about 50. But the goal is really, in fact, not to have an Arabia 500, it's to have an Arabia 5,000. Okay, so the question really becomes, everybody knew the 50, but now we have 500. This is amazing. There are many more. Who are they? How are they growing? And how do we put them on the world map so that investors come to them, great talent comes to them, customers come to them? That's the Arabia 500. Now, what I want to sort of tackle quickly is this question of the Arab world's potential and tell you what I see through the Arabia 500, not necessarily entirely my opinion, but these are the facts. So this is a $12 billion group of companies growing at 40% a year each year. So this is an awesome group of companies growing. Here's one way that they are growing that I think has not been addressed significantly today, and I really want to put on the table. We talk a lot about content, we talk about gaming, we talk about investment, but I think we've got to really talk about who is a great customer in the Middle East. And I think the great customer is the elephant in the room that is always the one we're attacking, government. All right? So what's holding back the entire Middle East, and I say this as a half Arab with a funny name, Habibi, so I get to talk about the Middle East, is government. There is very little private sector in the entire Middle East. The market is government, controlled or directly owned or manipulated. They are the largest customer. And they are so colossally ineffective that, in fact, that's what you want from a customer. You want them to be big, have a lot of spending power, and be in desperate need of improving their services. That, to me, is the Arab Spring, when the governments, in fact, are able to effectively and efficiently engage, whether it's healthcare, education, regulatory services, business startups, energy, environment. We will have what we all deserve in this region and far beyond that. So I think the amazing opportunity for entrepreneurs is actually to target government. Those systems are huge, and they're at least 50 years out of date, and that is just fantastic. So what I want to do is close by giving you 3 examples of Arabia 500 companies who figured this out. And before I give you this example, if you look at the United States, there's something called the Inc. 500. It's 30 years old. It's the ranking of 500 of the fastest growing private companies in America. And 20, 30 years ago, there was baby Microsoft and baby everybody you've heard of. 1/3 of the customers on the Inc. 500 are government. So this is not like I've just made this up. This is a way to really succeed. But it happens in the Middle East. If entrepreneurs succeed serving government, government will succeed. And in fact, it's an amazing virtuous circle. In the United States, yes, we can improve at the margin what government is doing, we can debate what government is doing, but in the Middle East, there's unlimited upside. You get it right here, you can do this in Africa, you can do it in Asia, you can do it everywhere. So I see government, who we're always critical of, as the customer of choice. So 3 quick examples of how Arabia 500 companies are doing this in very unusual ways. So I'm going to take a non-ICT company, which is Pharmacy One in Jordan, one of the great success stories, built the first pharmacy chain in Jordan and now is exporting to Saudi Arabia and many other countries. They're on the Arabia 500. Well, what does Pharmacy One know? They know exactly who's buying what, having to do with healthcare. And they have to then bill back the government. Well, it was so frustrating billing back the government. They just said, look, we will completely redo your technology system as it pertains to management of healthcare data and procurement around healthcare data. They are now a massive technology solutions provider to the government of Jordan. That is sellable to basically every country in the world. That's fantastic progress. On Time is a Dubai-based company. And if you go anywhere, it's very hard to start a company in the Middle East. On Time said anything you do that's government, that you interface with society, is sloppy and bad if you're in the Arab world. So let us take that piece where the government interfaces with society, whether it's starting a business, getting your permit for this, getting your healthcare card, getting your visa, and we'll do it. So if you go to an On Time location in Dubai, now throughout the Emirates, it looks like an Apple store. It's fabulous. First of all, you want to be in there, unlike everywhere else we spend in government offices. There are these Emirati women, they welcome you, they're quick, they're fast, everything gets done. They have saved the government of Dubai, and now more in the Emirates, a huge amount of money, and society is happy, and don't you love their name, On Time. I mean, if there's anything the governments of this region are not, it's On Time. So I would say the amazing challenge is our amazing opportunity. Target government, target how you convert knowledge to performance. And entrepreneurs who will get that right, just two limited examples, have unlimited upscale in this region, and then to export that to two-thirds of the world at least, possibly export it back to the United States, which is now starting to go off the cliff.
Thank you so much, Anne. And I would love some of the questions to then to challenge her on this point and just kind of build on Anne's point. But I'd like to turn to Jim, and maybe Jim, it'd be wonderful if you introduce yourself. But I would also love just from the four panelists, maybe you could give your thoughts on a constant thread that you see or something that could really be built on in terms of.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Jim Poissant. I have the privilege of being the CEO of the World Information Technology and Services Alliance, which consists of 85 countries, which incorporates over 90% of all the IT companies in the world. So I've got the absolute best job in the world. I'm not sure I can add to what has been said, either on this panel or all day, because I think it's been excellent. I think the content has been excellent. I think perhaps my value add could be some observations. Because I'm everywhere in the world, and I happen to have an opportunity to participate in forums like this, I come away with impressions and some lessons that I'd like to share with you. And where I see the most success and where I see the most failure, maybe I can share that information with you, and you may hopefully find it of interest. Let me begin by a comment about the potential of this region. The region's potential is in your hands and hearts. That's all it is. I mean, the playing field is level, and you can do whatever you want. You have leapfrog capabilities in terms of technology. So I'm going to leave that in your able hands to move forward. Where do I see the most success? Let's take Korea, for example. If you look at Korea, they have a wonderful long-term strategic ICT plan. Why has it been so successful? Why are they benefiting so much now? Well, they started a long time ago, and they've learned. But I think the elements of the plan, now, I've heard about the Jordanian plan, and I'm looking forward to reading that plan. I'm not sure if that plan has the elements of what I'm about to say. In the Korean plan, it's long-term. It's anywhere between 8 and 15 years. And the reason why it's so long is because it outlasts governments and administrations. So once the plan is set in motion, if you have a new government or new feelings of how to run the government, it doesn't change. The plan is pretty well moving along. So it's funded as well. Now, one of the geniuses about that plan is every 18 months they shake it out. And for example, if you had a plan and it didn't incorporate social media, it's not going to be a plan, effective plan. So they shake it out, they put in the new technologies. The second observation I'd like to share with you is the places where I see it's most effective, where they're really moving most effective, and I actually have maybe some inside information about the Jordanian system, but it's typical. It's not anything different. There's not a close association. Where it's successful is there's a very tight-knit association between government, between the private sector, and between academics. I see that in most forums, we treat it separately. You know, education is one thing, and government services is another thing, and the industry is in successful ICT development societies, it's all together. Why do I say that? Let me give you an example, if I may. In one of the countries that I visited, about 20 years ago, the government had mandated that every kid in that society had the right to go to college. It sounded great idea, you know, and don't worry, you can go on and through college. Well, there's a serious problem in that idea, or that mandate. Not every kid should be in college. That's a fact of life. I mean, we have a lot of great jobs that are not necessarily requiring a college education. So when you visit the universities in this country, you'll find that if you talk to the professors, they are teaching to the lowest level. And so the kids who don't even want to be there, but are there because their parents are insisting there, are not really learning that much. And then the kids who are really there to absorb, they're not getting taught. So here's what happens. When they show up at Microsoft's door for a job, Microsoft has second thoughts as whether it should invest it there or not, because they have to retrain these kids. And so they can easily go to another country, perhaps the Philippines or another country, where they don't have to put in that major investment. So I'll give you one example. I think if you look at Mexico, Mexico's coming on strong. About 3 or 4 years ago, when I started going to meetings there, I went to IBM's facility, one of our members, and in the meeting, there was the dean of the School of Business and the mayor in the room with me, and I just went to visit IBM. So I kind of thought it was, you know, kind of accidental, coincidental that they'd happen to be there and maybe they wanted to talk. I went to HP that afternoon and the same thing happened, but a different set of government and a different set of academia. And then I actually asked my host, what is this? I mean, this is not by accident. He said, well, we've never have a meeting when we talk about IT and not include government and the academics in the same room. It only makes sense. So I could all kinds of things to say, but one of the things I would say to the entrepreneurs out there is that in my generation, I grew up in an era where it was always the killer app that people were looking for. They were always looking to be that next Microsoft. I don't think there's going to be too many more operating systems out there. I'm not sure how many Facebooks are needed, but I think it's local. You know, the development is going to be local. And I encourage folks who might see this, look under your noses in terms of requirements and necessities right in your own community. I participated last week in an award ceremony in Paris for the United Nations. And one of the award winners was a young kid who noticed a problem in an African nation with fraudulent prescriptions. So these people are making these counterfeit drugs, and people are dying from this. He created an app on a cell phone, on a phone, where he could read the barcode and connect back to the pharmacy to read the number to whether or not that particular prescription was fake or real. And he got a business with all the pharmacies in the nation, and now it's kind of being used across it's saving lives, saving millions of lives. My last comment, I appreciate the time. I read a statistic that I'm still kind of coming to grips with, is that 50% of all the world's hospital beds are occupied by people with water diseases, whether that they're drinking poison water or the water is in the plants or the foods. And I think certainly there's got to be some folks out there that can solve that problem. So let me turn it back to you. I thank you for the opportunity.
Sure, thanks a lot, Jim. And I just, because I was watching, Laith and Majdi writing, I mean, I have a lot of interjections, but maybe I'll just start with Laith, because I think you touched, both you and Anne touched on a lot of points that Laith holds dear.
There are a couple of things I think are important. I do think the Middle East holds a lot of potential.
It's not working. Yeah.
The Middle East has enormous potential with its youth. The demographics that are creating the Arab Spring and the problems also is where the opportunity lies. I think part of what we're witnessing is an unlearning of past ways and an attempt to try to relearn something that is productive and proactive. And that's where I think that's where the challenge lies. You mentioned about the national ICT strategy. I just happened to finish with the Ministry of ICT writing it. So what I do want to say is that there was severe consultation between the government and the private sector and some aspects of academia. Neither sector is used to this type of cooperative work. They're slowly building trust with each other, and I think that will get better. At the rate that our governments change, almost any plan outlasts the government. So the current plan is for 5 years. One of the things that I think really that we need to try to accelerate or to force is intersections between economic sectors and ICT. And I'm going to go back to what you said, looking under your noses, and also going back to Majdi's comments earlier. The Arab world inherently should be the most water efficient place on earth because of the fact that this is where we live and we don't have much water. And I think things like water management systems should actually be coming out of our part of the world, not out of somewhere like the Great Lakes region of the United States, where there's huge amounts of fresh water. So one of the things in the strategy is trying to force these intersections between, let us say, ICT and energy ICT and water ICT, and in the case of Jordan, pharmaceuticals, ICT and medical care, where we can develop deep niche knowledge that will be relevant for Jordan first, but then also relevant elsewhere. The other thing that we've noticed, and the reason, I was very interested in saying that you had the mayor of the country, or the mayor of the city, and people from the ministry, is that there is also an evolution of the way that we perceive education. Not everyone should go to college, but also the speed of change now is so fast that even the paradigm of a university education, I think, is going to be increasingly in question. And one of the things that the Information Technology Association of Jordan is trying to do in cooperation with government is to come up with a professional development or professional certification center for ICT such that people can either deliver what is needed now or prepare themselves for what is going to be needed in 2 or 3 years. And I think that's very important. And maybe the last comment, because I think we'll be closing, shutting this soon. I've looked at if you've gone around, there are immensely talented people, and the democratization of technology, whether it is the internet or mobile devices or even satellite television, has shown tremendous things. I've seen companies, there's a company called Biladcom that is a Jordanian company doing massive multiplayer online gaming that is 3D animated, that is likely to have implemented in it virtual economies where you can buy and sell things as part of the game, which I think is immense. There are other people working on software development technologies, really out-of-the-box thinking. And so I have great faith in what we have. And I think maybe the last thing, and ending with Anne's comment about the virtuous cycle, is we need to get out of a paternalistic private-public sector relationship into a proactive, both sides pushing in the same direction sort of thing. And I think that's coming. The question is how to get government and the private sector to sort of understand where each of their strengths lies and how to focus on a common objective for the benefit of the entire country.
Yeah, do you want to add anything, Matthew?
Yeah, no, I second a lot of that. That sounds very good. The only point where I'd just maybe offer a slightly different perspective is that on the question of planning. Now, the IT sector here is very well led, and it has very great role models and great people. And it's true, we look across the region, and one of the reasons why we started the education program within Taj was the clarity of its leadership. But I really don't think it's the planning process, but the comments that you made, sort of more of a dynamic, ongoing partnership, because the problems that one faces as you try to develop a sector or try to address problems don't often reveal themselves initially. You can't plan for the problems that you'll have once you unlock the first hurdle. Only then will you know what you need to do. And it's that ongoing partnership and the feedback loops that then help. And feedback loops where governments hold citizens accountable and citizens hold governments accountable. Actually, it's more so that service delivery gets improved. And we've done a lot of research around that. And I think that the point that government is a great client, driver of growth is very true. And since doing this work on investment climate, when we work on regulation reform, for the last 2 years, we went from having about 5 projects to moving past 20 and getting close to 30 projects, almost all of which have an IT element. So we see the current process, which often involves streamlining procedures, then becoming automated. All of those things are going to need governments to purchase them. We don't finance that, but the governments are going to be doing that. That is happening. A lot of it's happening below the radar screen, and people aren't giving the governments credit for what they're doing. But I see that as very much on the path and what we need to do more of, those very creative partnerships.
And one of the things that I'd want to add is government and private sector need to recognize that they're working for the same thing. And that's a big shift. And once that occurs, I think all of what you said, the partnership will occur. And moving them towards that is what I think a lot of people should be trying to develop now.
Anne, do you want to add anything to this point? And then maybe we'll see if there's questions.
Yeah, I'd like to add 2 ways to operationalize this, because I think there's government, there is the incumbent private sector, and there's the entrepreneurial sector. So I think there's a bit of a lockdown between government and the incumbent privates. And so to the extent that they're talking, it is the same cohort talking. And sometimes the ministers switch between one side and the other. And they're related. So I think the question is sort of putting a new infusion, and how could that be done? So I think it's also the question of the new private sector enabling government. As an example, I'm not saying government is the only thing we should be talking about, but I think we didn't talk enough about it today, so I want to explicitly make that point of an enormous opportunity. So here's what I would do if I had the latitude. First of all, I would make all government bidding public. Right? So that if there's an RFP, any government agency, municipal or national, wants to buy X, that is publicly available. Okay, we know darn well that is not the case. And I live in Saudi Arabia, where I do a lot of work with the government of Saudi Arabia. It's not available. But wouldn't you love to know what every ministry and municipality would like to buy? Okay. That just, first of all, opens up the whole aperture of who can compete and how can compete. The UK government did something that totally shocked me and I thought was brilliant in the end. Their defense engine, which is very large, I mean, talk about a good customer to have, a lot of money, spend, you know, when you get a contract, it's usually for 3 years. I mean, it's perfect. They mandated that 5% of the spending, not a particular project, but the overall spend, had to go to up-and-coming new companies. Why? Well, you know, it sounds good, of course, so that's a good enough why. But the real why, and they wrote about this, they wanted the innovation cycle to be faster and smarter. And they realized they were stuck with the same incumbents all the time. And if they simply had a floor of 5, it could be 50, but a floor, they're going to force themselves to look for the new thinkers that speed up the cycle and innovation. So if I were to materialize all of this, I would say every government should make, above maybe a certain amount, contracts visible online. People should be able to see what they are. Then entrepreneurs, incumbents, whatever, can join forces and bid. Second, I think there's a massively good idea baked into the UK defense idea of this minimum 5%. So I think we have to structure how this happens, but I think the big win in the Middle East is upside with governments. Again, I think we're doing a lot on the private sector, a lot, but this one is we're at ground zero, ground 10 here. We have a lot of upside to go.
Great, thank you very much.
Are there any questions? Go ahead, sir. Any other questions? Just so I can.
There's one next to him.
Okay, great.
There's no mic, I think I'm loud enough.
Yeah, I'll bring everybody closer to you.
I have been lucky enough to work in Jordan for the last 1 year and a half, and as leading Microsoft in Jordan. And in this 1 year and a half, I had 4 ministers of ICT to deal with. Like, can be 5 not yeah. I'm not there anymore.
Could be you.
So when you talk about it's come from the ICT,
Official statement.
Thank you. So I would say that if we talk about like sustainability and trying to be able to understand, and once we had lunch with His Majesty, and I told him, sorry for my ignorance, but I would like to ask this question, and I would love to have an answer. I didn't get an answer, but the question was, His Majesty is the one who appoints the Prime Minister, and the Prime Ministers are appointing the ministers. Why every 4 months or 5 months we are getting a new minister? The new minister is always the main thing that he's trying to do is to try to delete and to try to do something that is so much different than the minister before, while the power who is putting these people on their places is the same. So His Majesty is appointing the prime ministers. Why the new ministers, all what they try to do is to try to change what happened in the last 4 or 5 months and do something. If you look at other kind, I will not go to the Saudi example. Let me go to Dubai example, which is I love and admire. Sheikh Mohammed is looking at Dubai as he's a CEO of a company that he decides about what will be the future of this country and how would like he to roll it out. He managed to be able to have a lot of transparency of how the government is buying all what they need to do in a very smart way, using technology to be able to make it enabled, and everybody knows how that purchase or how that contract has been landed. My point is, I do believe today it's great to have a very strong partnership between public and private sector. But the problem that we have today is that the agendas of both of them, it should be, as all of you, the distinguished panelists, that they should be for the sake of the country. But it's not. Government is coming with a very short term, having a very tactical objectives to achieve, while the private economy or the private companies in this country, to be more specific, has something for survival and to stay as longer as possible. And we had discussions with the previous ministers. Nidal was there in the ministers, and the minister would say that you as private sector, I don't really mind if 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 companies close down because of our decision on that perspective. And that's coming from a minister of ICT who would come say, big companies who's hiring 100 or 300 employees in this country, saying that, you know what, if you don't like my decision, you close down, go and work in other country. So that kind of mentality between private, and sometimes Marwan Jum'a, as you said, he can be private sector, next day he's a minister, that's great. But you will have other situations where government is living in a silo what they wanted to decide and wanted to do, and to have it something else. Taking it to the next level, where Jordan, as has been mentioned today, you cannot build a company and sustain it as having the end customer is in Jordan. You need to take it, as Fadi Ghandour mentioned in the morning. So it has to be in the region. Trying to take government here to try to help companies in Jordan to go to others, you will find like solutions that you would just laugh or cry hearing that solution. So how you think that, and maybe Laith and other, you can share what would happen in this one. In meetings in this country, you will find His Majesty attending meetings, prime ministers, ministers, you will have them there. But in the end, after that, how we take this to real life and how to do it is horrible. And that's the execution. And execution is a strategy. It's not something that out of that. I will not go with education where I think it's disconnected to the needs of the market. As we mentioned, when we tried to hire in Microsoft and when I was with Google trying to hire in this country, it was very hard because there is a lot of graduates in the universities, but I don't think they are now. 10 years ago, it used to be. Now it's not as relevant to what the market is looking for and what we need. So I don't know if you have a comment or a solution on this.
Yeah, go ahead. And then maybe give Anne a chance. The three of them.
There's a reason it's been out for the country. That's a tough act to follow, but let me give you an observation.
I'm sure you can do better.
A couple things I didn't say is that when I look at successful ICT development countries, inevitably they're going to have champions in government. You know, people who get it. And you know, I'm not totally sold on a plan for planning's sake, but I think when you go through the process of planning, you're looking at where's the infrastructure, what kind of infrastructure you're going to put in, what are you going to tag on to that? You know, what do you, another thing that I'd like to really advocate here is I go around the world. It seems like every country in the world says they're positioned beautifully to do the region or the world or whatever it is. My advice would be as you develop your long-term strategy, you need to decide, you don't need to, but it'd be helpful if you had an idea. In 5 years from now, what do you want the world to think of Jordan or the Middle East? What do you want it to think of? Because unless you start planning on what it is you're really good at and what you're going to focus on, the world will never know, and they may go someplace else. So that's something else that kind of falls out of this plan. Going back to the government, where the government officials get it, you know, and I forgive government because, you know, we come from industry. Government people don't necessarily come from, they're not IT people. They're politically oriented or whatever. You have to help and, you know, form that partnership with them. But again, where I see champions, where people are on fire with the fact that unless they get moving, unless they motivate the government, unless they get with the digital age, their country will fall further and further and further behind. It's that spirit that once you get somebody or a group of people thinking those terms, then you take off. But anything less than it's an urgent necessity to get involved in this revolution or get further and further behind, then you're going to be subjected to staying behind.
Great, thank you so much. Anne, do you want to add anything? Or late, do you want to?
Yes.
Sold.
Just addressing Husni, I've been doing this for a long, long time. And it's obvious to me that there are, both the private sector and the public sector are sort of guilty of a tactical, this is mine sort of thinking. There is going to come a time in Jordan where the private sector is either going to move, okay, or they're going to have kitchens here, but they're going to exist somewhere else, and that's what's already happening. And government is going to fall further and further behind, not in terms of technology, but in terms of fiscal health. And that's really what the challenge is. Nidal was with me at the consultation process, meetings with the government and with the private sector. I was equally brutal with both sides. I was brutal with the government because they were looking at companies in the same order that you said that if 5 companies die, it's not, none of my business, which is rubbish, okay? But the private sector also is saying, we're trying to protect their short-term interests at the expense of the health of the ICT ecosystem. So you had a tug of war between, let us say, the telecom companies and the IT companies. And this is why it's very important, and as you said, to have this overarching vision of what you want to work for. If you say, if this is where we want to go, then government, you need to be like this, okay? But private sector, you need to be like this. And it's only when that realization occurs that you will be able to make progress. I think we are so close to the precipice that we do not have much wiggle room. And I think the reality is going to force us to be disciplined in doing a few things well. We can't do 17 things, we can do 3, or we can do 5. And you have to be very choice and select about that.
I'm just going to go to the other questions. Thank you very much, Laith, and thank you for the. There's a question over here.
Hello, my name is Rashid Arando. You told us about working with government for entrepreneurs. And in my country, in Morocco, it's true that half of the order from IT are coming from government. But for entrepreneurs, it's difficult to get order from the government. So in US, how they get around that is they created the Small Business Act, which helped the entrepreneur get contract from government and then get bigger and bigger. Do you think we should also, in our countries, get kind of a similar Small Business Act?
Small Business Act?
Yeah, I mean, so just to frame it, because I think it's an excellent question, and I think that often gets lost. I mean, you have entrepreneurs that are punching well above their weight to really build a framework for the future. And we're talking about the elephant, and it's a monumental challenge. And you know, where do they start? Is government even a relevant option in this specific case? I'm going to give to Khalid first, looking at it from the entrepreneur perspective, and I'd invite anybody else to add to what Khalid has to say.
Okay. Let me give an example, so it might answer your question and it might not. Please correct me if I'm wrong. In 1996, we started in Jordan, doing animation and trying to bring new technology to the region. The problem was that our system or ecosystem, or if you want to open a company, you face this and that. You have to have more money to establish. The barrier of entry is really higher than any other countries. So we jumped into Dubai in 1997, something like this, or in 1998. And in Dubai, as Hosni mentioned, I think the system is ready since even before the 2000. So we can recruit people, our passport is in our pocket. We're treated like normal entrepreneurs or human beings. They have a system, you pay money, you get a visa. So this helped us a lot from growing from 3 people up to maximum 50 people. This is maybe my average of growth, then I sell the company. But what I say is the barrier of entry is really low in UAE, and you know what you can do and the time you need to establish a company. It's 3 weeks, then it's 3 weeks. While here we opened a branch, now we're trying to open a regional office. We have a معفى من الضريبة, I don't know, tax exemption office. Then they told me, oh, it's easy, you pay it. Sorry for saying that, but this is the truth. You need only 2,000, 3,000 JDs, $5,000. I said, oh, great. I recruited 14 people, and at the end of the day, it was exempted from tax, but I have to pay 5,000, or depend on the capital, 10,000 JDs, put it in the bank for 5 years, and I could not take it back. And for us as entrepreneurs, we need every penny. And now I'm transferring into a regional office, and the process has been 3 months, and with lawyers and this, and it costs 1,000. Yeah, this is true. But it takes a process. You need to audit 2 years out of the country and be profitable. Many big companies, I don't want to mention big players like Souk and Marca VIP, we don't know if they're profitable, but they're big, right? So they have users, they have e-commerce, they have power of purchase, different countries' exposure. So I can tell from Maktoub days, and Hosni opened, he tried to go and put, because me and Hosni worked together in Maktoub, and I'm a friend of everybody saying, okay, let me put it this way. So Hosni begged Maktoub to go to Dubai because there is potential. He saw potential. Even I remember he paid his tickets, you know. So And we move to Dubai and we make millions there because it's not the government money, but the government vision for us to be in a free zone with no tax. So all my millions, I'm a Canadian almost now, so I never paid tax on that because it's a free zone company. But I don't have much money because we keep spending it. So, okay, there is no much, maybe making a lot of money because you keep investing and growing and opening new companies. So we have in our history, maybe Hosni knows more, but it's more 6 or 7 in our short history. It's 10, 15 years, and we started very small, $10,000. And we could do that like in 2000. Now, at least we need 12,000 to start a company in Dubai Media City. So here where there come the government helping entrepreneurs, like, and it makes it easier. I don't want to take much time.
Sure. Anne, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the question. An Arabia 500 winner who was asking that, I think the question was about a Small Business Act and whether that's valuable. So let me say 100% yes, and very quickly, why? It not only opens the door and forces a mechanism of letting new entrants in who can, as we talked about in the UK, increase speed cycle time, bring in innovation. But here's why the US ecosystem works. It's not that it has smarter entrepreneurs, although immigration has been an enormous boost to the United States, entrepreneurs who come in from all over the world. Here's one really interesting thing that was done there that I think should be done everywhere. The Small Business Administration, often a sleepy, not that helpful administration, but it has a very important law, which is that government procurement must have a certain amount of small business firms that have the ability to bid, and the appropriate ones win. Okay, that's nice, but you know what the real killer app there is? You're a small business who won that, you have a contract for whatever part of government, you can go to a bank, you are bankable. 7% of US companies get VC money. It's just a complete illusion that entrepreneurship is fueled by VC and private equity. It's a tiny amount, but those who have bankable contracts, they get to play. They get to wake up the next day. They get to keep going. So the Small Business Administration, which is not so great, just had one fabulously great idea, which is create bankable companies. Then banks are going to basically lend against whether the Department of Labor or whoever, the municipality of X will pay, and until recently, maybe last week, it was a pretty foregone conclusion that they would pay. And so I think a small business law of some kind has just immense system upside. And I think we've missed that and gotten distracted by how many VCs we do or do not have. We need to have bankable companies. Bankable companies get there better and faster if they have big customers, and the biggest customer in the Middle East, whether we like it or not, is the government.
Thank you so much. I want to go to the question. I don't know how much time. Are we over time, under time?
We're kind of getting there.
Yes.
Okay, but we'd love to. We'd love to get your question because represents that side of this room.
I am a telecom company, and I am metering my bandwidth. And I encourage people, or I encourage companies, okay, please place more ads on pages that people downloaded in Jordan. Because Jordanians at the end, they are going to pay for the bandwidth, they are going to pay for your ads, they are going to be charged like 10 JDs every day if they use the internet like what I do. And out of that, actually, 60% goes to the government. So how can you realize any potential in such an environment? This is my question to all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's how I understood it. Do you want to get it?
And if I understood your question right, if government is taking 50 or 60% of revenues, how you can realize your potential?
And the planning comes in. When you start looking at what you want to be in 5 years from now and you want to be competitive in the digital age, these are the questions that fall right off in front of you. You're going to have telecom rates that are too expensive for people to use? Get rid of them. You're going to charge people for courses? Get rid of them. You know, these things are easy. They're easy things to pick off because in order to get to the end, you have to come to some tough decisions. Things have to change. And this is where, again, the champions inside the government are absolutely critical because they will plow through all of those thousands of things that have to happen. I will tell you, I mean, if you go to Taiwan, I think there are like 32,000 courses for people all over the island on IT, free. I mean, it's incredible. If you go to Malaysia, you can get free land and tax write-offs and buildings and unbelievable. You can. So the countries that get it are really, really, really going after that investment. They're knocking off the questions that are really simple if you get it. But you have to understand you're in a battle here for the future.
I want to just thank you because that provided me context for this comment. If you look at the history of Jordan, okay, government has been the driver of economic growth. The government has been getting foreign assistance from either Great Britain or the United States or the GCC or whatever since 1946, when this country was basically farmers and Bedouin. Okay? It created a mindset where the government is supposed to drive everything. And this is a mindset that exists in government, and this is a mindset that exists in a lot of people in the private sector. They always want the government to spend so they can benefit from the spending. The reality is today is that the government has 80% of its budget, 82% of its budget spent on salaries. So they have 18% of what they can do outside of that. This explains why government is taking 50% here and 50% here, because they need to survive. This is the edge of the cliff that I was talking about. There has to be a realization that the government cannot play the role it used to play by both the public sector and by the private sector. This means that the public sector needs to shrink and become more competitive in its thinking, to take all of the hard decisions, to not tax people as much as they did. If they do that, they cannot employ 400,000 people. The government employs something like 50% of the workforce in Jordan. This is ridiculous. Okay? But the counter-argument for the private sector is the private sector should not be focusing only on serving government. The private sector should serve government, but the private sector needs to look for export potential, needs to look for markets with the other private sector companies here. So both sides have to unlearn the last 60 years and relearn something new. And this is very difficult.
May I add to that?
Yeah.
So, at the moment we're in now, we have IMF programs in Morocco, in Tunisia, Egypt, Jordan. Egypt, they're negotiating it. Jordan, Iraq. Almost the entire region is blanketed with these programs. And it's very much related to this social contract we had before that said, essentially, stability for subsidies. That is unwound. And the new social contract is very much about responsive governments, empowered citizens and businesses. And it has to be about lowering those barriers to entry. It has to be about competition to drive down those costs. And I agree that governments changing a lot is an issue, but if we're talking about responsive governments and that there is a flow, a sharing of information in society and the private sector is organized, then they will push through the policies irrespective of changes of governments, because it's a social issue. It's an issue of national importance. It's not a minister driving it anymore. It's a minister responding to people, because the game has changed. And that's the moment we're in now. But it's a very uncertain moment. And because of that uncertainty, the economic pie is shrinking. And when pies are shrinking, you get so much polarization, so much tension, and we need to change that. And it has to move to a positive sum agenda. And I do think the government's ability to use ICT to make things more predictable, to make things easier is part of it. But you're absolutely right. It has to go beyond that. It has to be using information to empower new forms of growth, new forms of opportunity, because for the last 20 years, actually, this region is the lowest productivity growth region in the world.
And I want to add on to what Majdi said. Nothing that we learned in the last 60 years is useful from today forward. Yani, what we knew, our collective knowledge, has no application for the new social contract that you're talking about. It's very difficult.
And so maybe just ahead of closing, I'm just going to ask each of the panelists just to give me one sentence. So I'm known as an idealist and an optimist, so I refuse to end, but on a highly positive note. And we're talking about realizing the potential of ICT. To me, it's just maybe to close our eyes and to open our eyes, and for each of our panelists to share where they feel we as a region are realizing it and where that impact is happening. And I'll just start with myself. I mean, just working with entrepreneurship and working, in the early stage investing space. One of the things where I feel we're starting to realize our potential, and I think it's going to have an enormous, enormous long-term generational impact, is the role of women in this sector. To me, when we have 40% women participating, to me, we're starting to slowly inch towards realizing our potential. And I'm not just thinking of the ventures they're creating today, but I'm thinking of their children and the families tomorrow. So that to me is maybe starting off the chain, maybe going to Lathan, just to each one of us, and then closing it off.
And I fully agree with that. I think it is maybe the entrepreneurship that we saw in the last 20 years that is demonstrating a new model for development. Maktoub was one of the first obvious success stories of entrepreneurship. If we are able to show 50 of these, then government will take more, hopefully more positive attention, because their attention to Maktoub, once they knew how much it was sold for, was negative. But they need to understand that this is what creates jobs, this is what creates a better standard of living, and this is what we need to support. So I think more entrepreneurship, more demonstration, more successes, more role models.
Majdi, the hope.
After seeing all the entrepreneurs today, I am full of hope. I really, really am impressed by what I saw today. I think also when I look across the region, whether it's Tunisia, Morocco, Jordan, Egypt, or the Gulf, I see young people who want to change society. I see social entrepreneurs. I see a desire to connect with rural and the poor, and social justice and inclusion being converted into real opportunities, real apps, real jobs, and real opportunity to use commercial sense and technology for social good. So I think that's my hope.
Thank you. Khalid.
Last words, I want to say, as for me, I don't want to wait for the governments and mainly to wait for investors to start doing their own ecosystem. What I believe in is we need to challenge. I was interviewed by Google in 2005, and we were downlisted into 2, and at the end of the day, they took the other guy. So I said, I'm going to challenge Google, and I went so upset from London, and I opened a company in my wife's name because I was suing the other company who's working for. So at the end of the day, I love to make millions. I'm not going to wait for anybody to come, but we're waiting. We're still waiting. And like, if you can tell the others that we're going to do a showcase in the showcase room tomorrow, a challenge on how we can make millions all together this time, or either entrepreneurs or and investors. And we did it once, as thank you, he said, a Maktoub case. We can do other cases. We don't have to do another Facebook, but there are plenty of ideas that we can succeed on and continue doing it.
Great, thank you very much.
Well, I'm immensely optimistic that the future is right here. So the Arabia 500, first of all, shows us, it's a proof point, These are companies growing at 40% a year. Well, in the United States, if we're growing at 4% a year, we'd have a national celebration. 40% a year is unbelievable. So first of all, it's here, it's happening. It's not big enough. That's its issue. It is moving. It is massive. So what am I particularly optimistic about? The Arabia 500 are in every industry. That's fantastic. It's not just a few industries. We're not just superstars in a few spaces. We're superstars in many spaces. The Arabia 500 are starting to join up, team up, because they realize if you want IBM and Microsoft or the government of Jordan, you know, if you're a $10 million company, it's going to be a little hard. But if you're collectively $50 million, $100 million, you got some game going. So what I love is that the Arabia 500 themselves, not only growing at 40% a year, starting to join forces so that they can take on collectively some of the big problems of the region. I think the ultimate home run is when you can convert knowledge to performance. And there is so much knowledge sitting out in the world. Somebody has solved the problem. If we can take that knowledge and convert it into performance here, just like On Time did in Dubai by being the government's interface to society, it's a pretty easy thing to do, and they do it well. So converting knowledge into performance, getting more and more of Arabia-type companies known around the world and getting them teaming up. I don't think we're talking 10 years. I think in a couple of years, at the scale, it can be done, but it's got to be done with a lot of cooperation among us and among others.
Thank you very much. Jim, just to close us off.
I believe that we have been given a very, very special gift, bordering on a miracle. And I'm not a religious type of person, but I see something that happened in a miraculous way. I asked both of the fathers of the internet, did they have any idea what they were creating at the time they created it? And they were honest with me, and they said, you know, we had some ideas, but we never dreamed that what would happen happened. So what I conclude is that we have a gift. So the question that we have to ask and answer is, what are we going to do with it? We know it benefits every aspect of human life. We know that. We know we can cure diseases and all of that with it. So the question is, to us in the generation that came from where the internet was invented, for those who we pass on, what's our legacy going to be? And I think that question, seriously considered, would create champions within government and industry, because it has to be answered in a positive way. So what are we going to do with the gift?
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. Just to thank our panelists.
And our great moderator.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Emil. Thank you to our amazing, amazing panel. I think this has been my favorite panel the entire day. So you go back and tell the others you missed out big time. Husni is still here, bless you. We're going to have to do what they call in the 3 Investigators books the ghost-to-ghost hookup, which is each one of you tells 5 people that we're going to be starting at 9 o'clock sharp tomorrow morning. Obviously, we're going to be meeting you at the dinner very shortly. So dinner will be at 8 o'clock. And if you've registered and haven't picked up your invitation, if you've registered for dinner and have not picked up your invitation, make sure you do that at the registration desk on your way out. Have a great dinner tonight, and we'll see you bright and early, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.